Hey y'all, what is going on? What is going on? It's your girl, Melba Pearson, Melba for Miami, Melba for Justice, also known as the resident legal diva. And it's time for another Mondays with Melba. Super excited for another one of my Forever Women Crush Wednesday ladies, and that is Representative Fentrice Driskell, who is oh my gosh, she is just amazing. If y'all don't know her, you need to get to know her and definitely take this opportunity to hear what she has to say, as well as learn more about the advocacy she's been doing in the Florida legislature this entire session and her entire career in this business. So, Fentrice, thank you so much for joining me on Mondays with Melba. I really appreciate it.
Melba, thank you for having me, and thank you for all that you do to keep the community educated and informed in a format that people like. You know, I love that you do this online and it's so accessible to everyone. So thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, listen, it's all about making sure that folks are empowered and know what's at stake when they go to the ballot box this August and this November. So let's dive right into it. Fentrice, can you share a little bit about, first of all, who you are, a little bit about your background, and the geographic area that you represent?
Absolutely. So I'll take the easy part first, or the last part first, which is that, so I'm Fentrice Driskell, State Representative for Florida House District 63 in North Tampa and North Hillsborough County. Great to meet everyone. I've been serving in this capacity since 2018. I also serve as policy chair for the Florida House Democrats, and most recently was elected leader designate elect. Basically, it's like, I don't know, what does that mean? It's basically like I'm leader in waiting, but I will be the first African-American woman to lead the Florida House Democrats in history.
Yes!
It's cool. So that's very exciting. But my background, so I'm an attorney by trade, just like Melba, yay. I grew up in Polk County. I'm a Florida native and a product of Florida's public schools. Went to Harvard undergrad, Georgetown for law. Thought about staying in the Northeast, but really wanted to give back to the community that had given so much to me. And so moved back after law school, immediately got involved with the community, mentoring young people, helping them with their dreams of going to college and just being that kind of a mentor. Clerked for a federal judge and then got recruited to a firm in Tampa where I've been practicing business litigation since 2006. And yeah, just really delighted to have the opportunity to fight for every Floridian's freedom to be healthy, prosperous, and safe. It is ultimately and truly my honor to serve. This is the greatest thing I've ever done, serving in the legislature in this capacity.
And what term are you in? How many years have you served in the legislature so far?
Yeah, so I'm rounding out my second term and I'm running for my third. Florida legislature, they term you out after 4 terms. So I get to serve for 8 years consecutively. So I'm like middle-aged as a lawmaker. I'm like at the halfway point.
But I mean, I kind of feel like this last legislative session might have aged all of us a little bit. Yeah. So I want to at least start off with the positive. Was there anything good that happened in this session? Because I didn't want to assume that it was all bad. Maybe I missed an email in between. I missed a couple, like something good, anything good this session?
You know what? I love that. And I knew you were going to ask me that question. And I was like, good. Was there any good? It is like, it was a very tough legislative session. And I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit more, just in the sense that there were so many bills focused on the things that divide us instead of what actually unites us as Floridians. But I would say that there were some good bills. One that is probably right up your alley is that there is a juvenile expunction bill that really tries to give our young people a second chance when they've made a mistake and they're young. It helps them get their records expunged, which matters if they want to go to the military or, just try to get a job after high school, or maybe they want to go to college, they want to get an apartment, all sorts of things where it matters for you to have a clean record. And I believe in giving people a second chance when they're doing the sorts of things to demonstrate that they deserve one. And especially when it comes to our young people in the juvenile justice system, many of whom happen to be Black and brown young men, we need to be doing what we can to build bridges and to make sure that they have a pathway forward to being, to building a life, basically, right? And so that was a really good bipartisan bill. It actually passed last session, but ultimately was vetoed by the governor. So I was so glad to see it brought back this year, and we're all very optimistic that it will be signed into law. I was even able to get a bill passed, even in the midst of unprecedented, unfortunately, partisan rancor. I got a bill passed that helps Floridians protect their retirement benefits when they're going through a divorce. And we know that is it's a stressful time for all families. So just making sure that their IRA benefits or individual retirement account benefits are protected from creditors when they're subject to transfer in divorce. We did some really good things around the environment this cycle. There's some things thankful to President Joe Biden and the American Rescue Plan and some of those federal dollars that came down the pike. Floridians are going to see some relief at the gas pump later this fall, where we're going to have a gas tax holiday that's due to the federal funds that we received. You're seeing law enforcement raises, which are due to the federal funds we received. We also, I believe, have some teacher bonuses that are coming through also with federal funds. So very grateful for those things as well. So there definitely is something to celebrate, even in the midst of all the partisanship.
I mean, and that is really huge, especially when it comes to the juvenile justice aspect, because again, you think about our youth and that whole pipeline to a better life, right? We hear so much about the school to prison pipeline. How about the pipeline of making sure our kids are getting a better life, even if they made a mistake or did something stupid or whatever the case may be, they're still able to get a job, go to school, go to the military, get their lives back on track and be productive citizens. But if we're not giving them that opportunity, we're contributing to unsafe communities. So I'm really thrilled to hear about that, Bill. See, I knew something good had to have happened.
Yeah. Because at a certain point you have to ask yourself, is it fair to judge a person, especially someone under the age of 18, when they're trying to figure their lives out? Is it fair to continue judging them by the worst day, perhaps what could have been the worst day of their life, making a mistake? And yes, if there's habitual issues going on, I mean, there are ways to address that in the criminal justice system. But for a kid who made a mistake and it's possible to get that expunged, I think it's a good thing.
For sure. So now let's talk about the bad. I think we can combine the bad and the ugly on this one. So if you could talk through some of the most problematic bills, and then once you're done with that, love to pivot into what happened during special session that brought y'all back from your home jurisdictions back to Tallahassee, and for what? So starting off with the bad and the ugly of the session, and then special session.
Oh, it was special, all right. I mean, it was extraordinary in all the wrong ways. But we'll start with what happened during regular session. And I know for those of you listening out there, you're probably like, oh, she's Democratic Party. She's leader of the Democrats, probably just approaching this from a partisan perspective. But please hear me from my heart when I say these things. As Floridians, there are things that we should all be concerned about, regardless of party. Okay. And so those are the things that I want to talk to you about tonight. So it starts with the 15-week abortion ban that we saw that's styled after Mississippi, abortion being a very tough decision that a pregnant woman would make, but that I personally believe should be between that woman, her family, and her God. I think that so often we don't understand the context of people's lives. We've not walked a mile in their shoes, and we don't know what consequences they have to live with when they make a decision either way. And the challenging aspects of the 15 weeks that ban is that it doesn't provide any exception if the woman is pregnant due to incest, due to rape, or due to human trafficking. I think that is a bridge too far. And there was testimony presented in the Senate. A doctor presented testimony about a patient of hers who was 11 years old. And unfortunately, this baby didn't start to show until she was past 15 weeks. Here she is, a baby being forced to have a baby. Under this law, there would be no recourse for her because she was past 15 weeks, and it was because a relative was molesting her. So I think we have to ask ourselves as a society, how do we balance, yes, the potential life of the fetus, but also the actual life of the mother. And I think we lacked compassion in that decision. So you're suppressing the stories of women who may need some compassion in their lives at that time. The other couple bills I want to draw our attention to really quickly, there was one, House Bill 7, that creates basically the ability for students or parents to sue their school district, or for employees to sue their companies or their employer if they feel like they're being taught history or diversity training in a way that makes them feel uncomfortable. And so with that one, you're suppressing the stories of marginalized communities, communities of color, whether it's the Black community, or I think about, Japanese internments back in World War II, right? So we can't teach about that either. Yes, it's a dark part of our history, but when you don't teach it in an accurate way, you rob young people the opportunity of being part of the story and that effort to help make America that more perfect union that we know it can be. And the last bill I wanted to mention was House Bill 1557, the Don't Say Gay bill. Many of you have probably heard about this one, which it is banning classroom instruction on gender identity or sexual orientation, grades K through 12. What's interesting about this one is that I think most people would agree, we don't want our kids that young learning about sex ed, but gender identity and sexual orientation are not those things, right? Like you're actually talking about who somebody is and who it is that who they love. And it is, that was a kind of like a red herring argument, right? Like they're saying, oh, we don't want sex education. Well, there was an amendment to say, okay, well then strike the language about gender identity, strike the language about sexual orientation, just make it about sex ed. And they refused to accept that on the bill. So that lets you know what it was really about, which was attacking our LGBTQ plus students and their families. Because if a kid comes to school and maybe they have two moms or two dads, and they start talking about that with their classmates, now the teacher can't intervene. What happens if the teacher happens to be in a same-sex relationship or gender? It's mean-spirited, and it is super, super wrong. And it breaks my heart that we're at that point where we're using people as punching bags and suppressing their stories, all to score political points, is something that we should all be concerned with.
And the sad thing is, and I had heard this from someone who was running for Florida State Senate, she'd gone to a random event and was just kind of trying to interact with people and talk to them. And she happens to be in a same-sex relationship. And she was just like, so many people really, grasped on to the GOP argument that this was about indoctrinating and grooming children and trying to make them gay from a young age. And one gentleman was saying that, now I've got to talk to my child about sex. How am I going to talk to them about gay people? And it's like, but that's not like, hello, first of all, this is again a solution looking for a problem, right?
Right.
Because teachers have always figured out ways to be able to incorporate those topics in a sensitive manner without getting into the nuts and bolts of how sex works, right? Because you think about the fact we know about Ken and Barbie, right? Like we grow up with Ken and Barbie. We know about Cinderella and the Prince and all these different, fictional stories that we grow up with or learn in school and all of that are already gender-based, right? It's the prince sweeping the princess off her feet and making her life so fabulous. So how come we can't talk about two princes or two princesses as it's just a story. It just is what it is. They really are attaching so much more to it and making something so pure into something very ugly, which is very disturbing. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox.
No. Because before you move on to another topic, Mel, because you're really articulating this so beautifully, which is what you're really talking about, right? It's a politics of fear. It's the politics that makes you afraid of your neighbor. It's the politics that builds up these boogeymen to seem really scary. And, if you don't side with us, then your kid's going to be groomed. No, that's not what's happening. Why are we attacking our teachers in this way? Our teachers, who, by the way, are not paid nearly what they are worth.
That part.
And we keep putting the stress on them. And so you're effectively saying, I need people to understand this. This bill is effectively saying that our teachers are groomers. How wrong is that? Right? Like this is not okay. And then back to the House Bill 7, the bill that's about teaching history and diversity, critical race theory is not taught in our schools.
It's not.
The Department of Education already banned it. And by the way, Republicans have been in charge of our school systems with complete power since 1998. So if it was taught, who would have put it there, right? Like it's nonsensical, and it's using the politics of fear. And we need people to pay attention and to really wake up to what's happening so that they're not manipulated in this way.
And just so you see, so y'all can see the connection of how disturbing this is. First of all, in not teaching accurate history, right, you're not only erasing the contributions of Black and brown people to this country, but you're also erasing your own history, right? Because there were white folks who marched with Dr. King, who, fought for civil rights and civil liberties in this country. Well, they're going to be erased from the discussion as well. So in this quest to kind of whitewash history, they have no problem, removing their own folks who really stood up and did good things from history, just in order to, I don't even know what the end game is there. And then secondly, when we look at how disturbing it is to see the number of math textbooks that somehow have run afoul of this law already. And for what reason? Because one chart in a book says something about racial differences, just to help, the students get their mind around calculating math. Somehow that's so abhorrent that now you need to pull that math book off the shelves. I mean, right. It's just like, where does this stop, right? And I do want to lift up the Brooklyn Public Library in New York has now created a program where any teen anywhere in the country can check out books from the Brooklyn Public Library in an effort to fight back against this censorship. So if there's a book that you're interested in that's pulled off the shelves of your high school, you can go to the Brooklyn Public Library online and be able to get that book and read it for yourself and make your own decisions, right? And unfortunately, that's going to put a lot more onus on the parents to basically almost homeschool their kids on accurate history, which again is insane. So pivoting to the ugly, talk to us a little bit about what happened in the special session and why it was so unnecessary.
Right. And again, this is a topic that I believe we should all be concerned about in Florida as Floridians, regardless of political party, the redistricting process. So every 10 years in America, we have a census, right? A census where we do the community count and all of those things. And based on our population growth, the state legislature is responsible for drawing new maps for our elections, both at the state level. So the state house where I serve, the state Senate, and then also Congress. We draw the congressional maps as well. The special session was to go back and draw a congressional map. Now, during regular session, we drew congressional maps. In fact, we drew two. I'm not actually sure that was the right plan to draw two maps. I think the Constitution requires us to draw a singular plan, meaning one map, but we drew two maps. While we were debating them on the floor, the governor tweeted out that he would veto anything that we passed. And true to his word, we passed those maps and he vetoed them. The governor then continued to insert himself in the redistricting process and decided to draw his own map. Republican leadership in the House and Senate said, we are not going to draw a map. We're going to wait and just use the governor's map. That is everybody's alarms should be going off, because this is a violation of separation of powers. I don't care what party is in control. The executive branch is supposed to execute the law. The legislative branch makes the law. The judicial branch interprets the law. Governor DeSantis, in a very heavy-handed and political way, inserted himself into the redistricting process and drew a map that reduces the representation of Black districts in Congress in Florida from 4 to 2, reduced it by 50%. It is a violation of the Federal Voting Rights Act and a violation of the state's constitutional Fair Districts Amendments, which passed with a supermajority of support. Floridians said, like a decade ago, we want close to a decade ago, we want our districts to be drawn fairly, legislature, hear us loud and clear. And we just chose to ignore that. Republican leadership chose to ignore that. And so now there's a map that's been passed that basically has 3 more Republican seats in it than it did before. So DeSantis is not only setting up a constitutional challenge, probably in the U.S. Supreme Court, over the Voting Rights Act, which is what in 1965 gave Black people the right to vote, basically, right? He wants that declared unconstitutional. And he also basically wants to have a Republican majority in Congress in the midterms. So it was very ugly. there was another bill. Should I mention that one with Disney?
Yeah.
Do we have time for me to share about that?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, remember how I was telling you about the Don't Say Gay bill? Well, Disney spoke out against that bill publicly. The CEO spoke out and he expressed remorse and contrition over not having spoken out about it sooner. And he was just saying that this is a very bad bill and this is against Disney's values. Governor DeSantis then decided to punish Disney, went after them publicly, and then had us file a bill during special session that stripped Disney of its ability to operate within a special district. And I don't want to get too technical, but it basically afforded Disney certain ability and like ease with government regulation so that it could operate and maximize the sort of tourism dollars that it's able to generate for the state of Florida, which helps all of us avoid having a state income tax. Because of the governor's temper tantrum and because Disney dared challenge him publicly and that special district has been eliminated, it is going to cost Orange County and Osceola County taxpayers anywhere from, it's estimated, $2,200 to $2,800 per household, Melba. And I'm just saying to myself, at a time where people are trying to decide whether or not to fill up their gas tank or put food on the table, this is a failure that the governor needs to own because he is really bringing it down hard on Florida's families just because he couldn't take criticism.
And not to mention, Disney is one of the largest employers with what they employ like 80,000 people in the Orlando area. They're the source of billions of dollars in revenue to the state of Florida. When you think about Disney itself, plus the Disney cruises out of the port of Miami here, out of the port of, in Orlando, Cape Canaveral, all of that. So if they were to just pick up their operations, let's say, and be like, you know what, Florida, we're done with you. You're being idiots. And let's go over to Alabama where there's a coast. There's a depressed economy so that they can still get the business incentives that they would need. Then what? And what's Florida going to be left with, right? We're going to have to make up that shortfall somehow. And if we don't get more tourism, and if we keep passing bad bills around the, LGBTQ folks so they feel that they're not welcome here in Florida, so they're not going to come spend their tourist dollars, marginalizing Black folks may not want to come down and spend their tourist dollars here. So that means the rest of us that live here will now have to have higher taxes to make up the shortfall. And that may not happen next year, but it will happen in the years to come because, it's a ripple effect. So these are all things that we have to think about as we go to the ballot box. So pivoting, because we only have a few more minutes left, what's the path forward? What are you guys working on for the next legislative session? Obviously, I know you've got an election between now and then. We know you're going to get reelected because you're fabulous and you've been fighting for the people of Florida, so that's like huge. But what's the plan moving forward to address some of these things? Is there any wiggle room to maybe, if we get a new governor, undo some of these bills? Or are there other ways that we can make sure that we're centering the needs of all Floridians?
Yeah, and thanks for that question. So a few thoughts. The first is that we will have one additional special session, at least one that I know of in May, where we address property insurance rates. Property insurance has been out of control and Floridians can no longer afford it. And many of them are getting dropped. Lots of insurance companies are being dissolved. And so it's a real crisis and we need to address it. Democrats have been calling for Republicans to address this for months. And finally, they listened and we're going to have a special session. So I'm hoping that that can be a bipartisan moment that we can have to work and try to bring some real relief for Floridians. In terms of the pathway forward, yeah, we got an election and elections have consequences. And I hope that what happened with the regular session, with all of these bills suppressing the stories of women, the marginalized communities, LGBTQ plus communities, suppressing the story of Disney, which, like as you mentioned, is not just a big corporation. It's nearly 100,000 workers and their families and their stories. What I hope is that people are paying attention and that between now and November, they really do the work that they need to elect candidates who represent and reflect their values. Because I think there's a lot that happened in this legislative session that does not reflect who we are as Floridians. And people forget Ron DeSantis won by only a fewer than 30,000 votes. Mm-hmm. When you consider how large Florida is and that we have 67 counties, that's fewer than 500 votes per county. He doesn't have this supermajority, overwhelming landslide win that people thinks he does, and that the way that he governs, right? So I think that Florida voters are smart and they are savvy, and I hope that they are paying attention. I hope that NPAs and independents are paying attention to what's happening and just recognize that things are way too out of balance. So we need people to get out and vote. That's it. It's period. It's all about mobilizing people to the ballot box, which, by the way, Republican leadership just made it harder to do that as well with the bad elections bill that was passed. But that's okay. Yeah. Everybody, if you registered to vote by mail last election, just make sure that you're registered this election, and just make sure that you vote. You have to vote for people who reflect your values, and we need a change in Florida. We absolutely do.
So speaking of which, you're up for re-election this year. Can you tell folks your website, as well as how they can learn more about you, engage, donate, volunteer, donate, volunteer?
Yes.
Donate. No, that was not like, this was not a skip or anything like that. Like, I say donate because, like I say a million times over, elections aren't free, campaigns aren't free. And if you want candidates that reflect the experience of folks who had to work for a living and didn't come from wealth, the only way to be able to support them is to donate if you can. No amount is too small. And the max for your race, you can advise us as to what the contribution max is.
Absolutely. So it takes resources to win. And I hope that something that I've said tonight maybe struck a nerve with people in a positive way, and that you would want to support me in my campaign. As I mentioned, I believe that every Floridian deserves the freedom to be healthy, prosperous, and safe. And that's regardless of what your party affiliation is. I fight for Florida. I'm a Florida native, and I want to see Florida win. I want to see us succeed. I want our young people to have a better pathway forward. I want us to fund affordable housing, make sure we have clean water, and we protect our pristine beaches, which is how we get the tourism dollars that we need for our economy to thrive. That's what I'm about providing real solutions. So if that's what you're about, my website is fentriceforflorida.com. That's my first name, FOR, Florida.com. There you can read more about me and about my campaign and the issues that I stand up for. You will find that I'm a very effective member of the Florida House, having passed police reform in a bipartisan way in the midst of everything that was happening with George Floyd, someone who fights for our communities and for the resources that we need for our communities to thrive. Please also connect with me on social media. I'm Fentrice4FL across Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, you name it. And I definitely love to engage with the constituents and the people of Florida. So please connect with me there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Fentrice. You know that I forever stay in your corner. You know I will support you. I will rock it till the wheels fall off. Thank you for all that you're doing for our community and being tireless, even though I know you must be tired, but being tireless in your pursuit of making sure that justice and equality is real for everyone in the state of Florida. So thank you for all you do. Everyone, her website is going to be posted in the comments, no matter where you're watching this. So please click on it, learn more, be engaged, and stay tuned. I will definitely be keeping everyone up to date on the voting deadlines coming up. So your deadline to register to vote, your deadline to get your register to vote by mail, early voting dates, all of that. I will make sure that you have that information so that you can share and make sure that other folks know what's at stake this coming election and know how to raise their voice. So with that, again, Fentrice, thank you so much for kicking it with me on Mondays with Melba. And thank you to all of you for tuning in. Share, like, comment, but always stay engaged. Take good care, y'all. Bye.
Bye.